Live from the Scheinfeld Center Innovator Studio at Santa Barbara City College, it's the Enlightened Entrepreneur Podcast, where we inform and inspire Gen Z to become even more entrepreneurial and innovative in our global economy. I'm your host, Julie Sampson, Director of the Scheinfeld Center, and thank you everyone for joining us to create livelihoods that matter, become our own bosses, and make the world an even better place. In this episode, we're going to continue our inquiry about how can we use business to create good. In this episode, we're going to look at the food industry. We know that the U.S. restaurant industry has been hard hit by the pandemic, with more than 17% of restaurants closing permanently or long-term in 2020. However, some restaurants have increased sales almost 188% during the pandemic. So what's going on here? Also, simultaneously, we have Gen Z on the rise, now representing 31% of the world population and 25% of the US population. And they represent 25% of restaurant sales. They're increasingly shaping the restaurant industry through their buying trends and purchasing power. And since they're on track to be the most entrepreneurial generation to date, they'll bring their values into restaurant startups as well, with an emphasis towards sustainability and doing social good. So how can those interested in a food service restaurant startup position themselves for success given these converging forces? What should the restaurant and the food industry look like as we move into the future? Well, joining us to break it down is Dan Goddard. He is co-founder of Backyard Bowls, which is an Açaí Bowl Café that originated in downtown Santa Barbara in 2008. So Dan, it's so great to have you, an SBCC alumnus here as our guest. We're eager to hear from you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Julie. It's great to be here.
Well, let's dive right in. For those who are unfamiliar, describe Backyard Bowls.
Well, Backyard Bowls is an Açaí Bowl Café, which nowadays it seems most people actually know what that is. But back when we started in 2008, it was a novel concept, actually. We didn't invent the Açaí Bowl that existed before, but we were the first ones to actually focus on it and to create a restaurant concept that was based around the Açaí Bowl. So that was in 2008 in downtown Santa Barbara. Like you said, I was a relatively recent Santa Barbara City College alum. I had gone from Santa Barbara City College to San Diego State University and studied business management down there. And it was just a couple of years post that when I came back to Santa Barbara to open Backyard Bowls in 2008. And very long story short, we've over the past 13 years now, we've managed to open a total of 6 locations and recently got a food truck going and have a couple more stores in the pipeline.
So how did you come up with the concept of Backyard Bowls and get it started?
The idea came to me, I was actually living in Hawaii at the time. And out there were a couple of spots that made a really good acai bowl, and they were wildly popular. It was part of the culture, part of the lifestyle out there was having a bowl before you go out surfing or whatever it is. And what struck me, the idea was, why has no one ever focused on this? It was always this item off on the side of the menu of a cafe or a juice bar or whatever be it. And at that point, no one had ever focused on it. So that was the idea, and we kind of ran with it. And my business partner, Pete, and I, he was actually out visiting me in Hawaii, where we brainstormed and came up with the actual concept. And both of us had met at Santa Barbara City College, and Santa Barbara was our favorite place in the world. So we knew that we wanted to find a way to get back there someday. And we ended up going for it. And we were 25 at the time, and we figured it out as we went. We did not have prior experience opening businesses or anything even remotely comparable to it. Yeah, we really learned on the fly and figured it out as we went. I made plenty of mistakes along the way. and somehow managed to get the doors open and get on our way.
That's right. Those mistakes are a valuable part of the entrepreneurial journey for sure.
Sure are.
Backyard Bowls has a really unique take in that in the values that your company upholds, and also your focus on sustainability. Can you talk a bit about that?
It's really why we started Backyard Bowls, was because the two of us were passionate about eating healthfully, living healthfully, and then about doing as little harm as we could in the process of things, and particularly in business. So Backyard Bowls was somewhat of an embodiment of the values that we had personally, Pete and I. And that's, I want to be careful to say that we're not perfect. Backyard Bowls is not the perfect model of sustainability, but those values influence every single decision that we've made through the course of our time in business. And there's so many aspects to that, so many things that we could possibly talk about. We're a certified green business and have these various operational practices that are in the interest of making us more sustainable. But the one that's far and away the most important actually is that we don't serve meat. And we're a very vegan friendly and vegetarian restaurant. Not even necessarily because we are personally that. I actually do enjoy eating quality meat myself, but I think that eating less meat as Americans is probably right there among the most important things that we could do to curb our environmental impact personally, day to day. So that in itself, our offerings are inherently far less impactful on the environment than your average restaurant. Was really important to us and continues to be.
How about the wind energy? I read on your website that you use wind energy to create the bowls. How does that work?
Sure. Well, we have these turbines that it's very simple. We buy wind energy credits for the energy that our stores use. So there's many ways that you can offset your energy usage by purchasing. I'm blanking on exactly the technical terminology, but you're able to offset your usage in the form of renewable resource derived energy. So I know that there's a number of different ways to do it. We partner with Acadia Power for most of our stores, and more and more businesses are looking in that direction. It's an easy way to make some difference. That's not to say that makes it unnecessary to lessen your energy usage in general, but it's a nice way to mitigate your damage to some degree.
You have several revenue streams with Backyard Bowls. You have the retail right there at the stores, right, where you serve the customers, but then you also have other things, like you said, a food truck, and people, you do catering, right? And also you have gift cards. So there are multiple revenue streams. And then you also have a really awesome website, I think, that makes it super easy for people to order online. Did you start out that way? That was a while ago, or is that something that you incorporated along the way?
It's certainly something we incorporated along the way. In 2008, things were quite different. Our website was nothing like it is today. Let's just say that. And the restaurant world was quite different. Delivery was not nearly as popular as it is this day and age. That's been, and if we're talking about the current day and age during the season of the pandemic and everything, where delivery, takeout, retail sales have become such a wildly important part of everyone's business, ourselves very much included in that. It's been very important that we got a bit of a head start on all of that stuff about 5 years ago or something like that, when we started embarking on the delivery and various other modalities of serving people beyond just in the day-to-day restaurant environment.
Yeah, it's really interesting how everything is coming together that seems to really favor backyard bowls. You had those multiple revenue streams that you were set up for. You have a product that, we were talking about Gen Z. This is right in alignment with what Gen Z favors in terms of their purchasing, of restaurant fare, with it being carry out and organically leaning towards organic and locally sourced, at least a vision towards sustainability and a real soul behind the business, with values that they can really uphold. Are there other things that came into backyard bowls being really having success during this time, given that so many of the other restaurants had a hard time? Is there anything other that we can add to this conversation that you think favored backyard bowls during this time? Because we're going to take that and look at what does it say for business models and ideas about how things should change so that restaurants can be more sustainable. So before we move on to that, can you speak to, is there anything else that backyard bowls is doing that you think really helped your business the company be successful during this time?
Yeah, well, you certainly named a lot of the elements to it. What I would emphasize, partly it's luck that the nature of our concept leaves us favorably endowed to really ramp up delivery, takeout, that type of business. That's much harder if you have a dine-in only fine dining restaurant, or even your average restaurant that focuses primarily on what happens in their dining room, and takeout's an afterthought. Whereas for us, we've been 70% takeout from day one. So it was not much of an adjustment for us to eliminate the dine-in portion of our menu and to carry on and to ramp up delivery services. So I can't take much credit or give Backyard Bowls too much credit for its success in that realm. But aside from that, which you also touched on, though, was that we provide what we believe to be a healthful product, and which is obviously something people are as concerned about now as they've ever been, as well as we make such efforts in sustainability and kind of authenticity to our mission and our values and everything. And those are the places that seem to be more inclined to stand the test of time, and the ones that people will look to want to support in a difficult time as well. You're not going to think of your giant corporate chain. You're going to think of the local spot that's involved in the local community and is doing things more in accordance with how you want the world to be. So I think that's been very important for us. And then we've got a really strong team of managers in place that have handled things incredibly well and been on top of all the many changes and evolving rules and regulations and everything to do with the pandemic and how to keep our employees and customers safe and everything running smoothly throughout all this. So there are so many factors, but we're in the end, we feel very fortunate to be where we are.
So with all of this, what would you say the pandemic has taught us about the vulnerability of restaurants overall, based on current business models?
In a pandemic type situation where dining indoors becomes problematic, your restaurants that are focused near 100% on their in-restaurant experience they're going to be the most vulnerable in a situation exactly like this. And I do think in general that, as a takeaway from the pandemic and everything that we've dealt with, that it's a good idea for restaurants to have their cards in order as far as these other modalities of service, to have their takeout, delivery, possibly retail, grab and go, or cook at home options. That kind of stuff, it can be really valuable mix to most any restaurant concept, and come in particularly handy in a time like this. But at the same time, I, on a personal level, I don't want things to overcorrect here in this situation. I'm optimistic and think that the pandemic's going to be waning here before too long, and hopefully we won't be dealing with another one for at least the foreseeable future. So I personally don't want the industry to go too far towards everything served in takeout containers and delivery focused, for reasons of sustainability and waste. And it's inevitable that when a restaurant serves you your food to take to go or to eat at home, that there's going to be a lot more waste and energy that goes into that. As anyone who's ordered delivery from your average ramen shop or whatever it is can attest to, you have this mound of trash when you're done, and it breaks my heart a little bit every single time. And so I'm hoping there's not an overcorrection in that direction, because I do think that things will be reverting to something closer to normal. Though that's not to say it wouldn't be smart to have all these other avenues of business really teed up so that you're more prepared for future problems that could arise.
Yes, that seems to make a lot of sense. Now that we've seen what can happen, knowing for any particular restaurant what agility factors are there, that like you say, it's not like now we all have to go to these alternative models, right? But do they have them in the playbook? Are they able to execute on them as needed? Because I mean, right now it's the pandemic, but here in California, and around the US and the world, I mean, there are other climate related and, weather related, natural disaster related things that can come up and disrupt business. And so I think that overall businesses in general, need to bring up this question of agility. Do we have agility built into the business model? And can we act on it so that if we do have to implement it, what are the vulnerabilities that we have in this particular location where we're operating, and then, have that hand of plays that they can do in case of those things. I think it's super important and a good opportunity. I think it's interesting with the restaurant industry in terms of the business model. If I understand correctly, typically like 30% of the budget, it goes towards labor, and 30% can go towards rent, which is a huge chunk right there. And then you have all of the ingredients and equipment, all the other things to tend to. But there are certain models of restaurants, fast casual versus a fine dining versus a food truck, versus a catering business, that have different profit margins, associated with that. So I guess the idea here is whatever one of those realms that you're in, knowing what the vulnerabilities are there and having the alternative agile playbook sounds like the takeaway, or what do you think?
Yeah, I think what you're saying is very true. I think that a lot of restaurants might just assume that in the event they had to switch to go, that they just can toss their food in a styrofoam container, throw it in a plastic bag and hand it off, and that you're good. But especially now that everyone's focusing on to go, and the the standard has gotten higher, thankfully, and it's worth putting a lot more effort and consideration into exactly how you execute a to-go order, a delivery order, how you package it, how you present it, how you ensure that it's served at the proper temperature, et cetera. There's plenty of things to consider to optimize that experience, because if you don't, nowadays you're going to be compared against all of these other restaurants that are also offering that delivery option, and there's a lot of room to play with how the experience ends up for the customer beyond just how good the food is when it starts in the restaurant. So there's a lot of parts of that chain that restaurants need to pay a lot closer attention to and put a lot more effort into.
Yeah, good. And I think the creativity comes into this too. Like, we have seen 4 fine dining restaurants. They've done some really creative things too, like subscription services. So this is a pandemic, so I think there's some limitation there, but it's the kind of thing where when they have a subscription service, there's like meal kits and stuff like that that they can have going on a regular basis, that can take into consideration the types of things that you're talking about, because it's about delivering that quality experience. And so I just think that there's that creativity is the key for a particular restaurant. What can they do to really serve their particular target market, in a way that really continues to build that community rather than having it fall apart during challenging times.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that generally speaking, there's just so much opportunity in the restaurant world right now, for the reasons that we're talking about, and as well as the fact that unfortunately so many restaurants have gone out of business, and there is going to be a whole new wave of ideas being tried and new concepts coming out, and there's probably not going to be a better time to launch a new idea than as we emerge from this period of time. So I'd like to stress the opportunities and positive side of what we're dealing with as well.
Yeah, so let's go into that. With the current reality where we're at with the pandemic, we're hopefully maybe beginning to emerge out of it. There's still some economic turmoil that we're dealing with, and definitely a lot of the workforce that's involved with working at restaurants, and they've been impacted heavily by the pandemic. So in this whole reality that we have going on, we still have people out there. If you are born to run a restaurant or a food business, you are going to be doing that no matter what, right? So what type of things should people be thinking about, if they're like, okay, I want to use this time as an opportunity? What are some things that they can think about, and some different types to get started? What would make sense right now? What are your ideas on that?
Yeah, like I said, I think there's so many opportunities. It's hard to say. I think that healthfulness and sustainability and locally focused concepts are going to continue to grow, become even more important as we're going forward. So, the breadth of opportunities, just sticking on those concepts right there, are endless. And to your budding entrepreneur who's looking to get into the restaurant world, I feel like there's just endless ideas floating around for you to jump on, and that there's no better time. And you don't even have to reinvent the wheel. You can take something that already exists and tweak it or improve it in some way, or create some new iteration on that. Kind of like what Backyard Bowls did. We didn't reinvent the wheel. We just kind of grew a new wing off of it. And I just feel like there's so many concepts waiting to be born out of this time. And my hope is that many of them will be focused on on the aspects that make our world and communities better and stronger, and that focus on things like sustainability and utilizing the local food supply chains, and the things that are net positives in every aspect of operations.
I think some of the concepts that apply to any business that can work here is the idea of it's okay to start simply. Sometimes aspiring entrepreneurs have a huge vision of what they want to create, but the question becomes, what is the simplest iteration that I can bring to market, with this? And that could be a food cart. It could be a pop-up restaurant. It could be a food truck. There are simpler types of business models in the food industry that you can start off with that mitigate the risk of like renting a huge place and needing to have a huge staff and, get all of this up and running. So in the meantime, even if you start simply like that, you can be developing your following, that then can follow you if you did start a brick and mortar type restaurant, right? So I think too, it's kind of interesting because of the mobility factor. That's something, if we're talking about natural disasters or pandemics or whatever can come our way, that's a way of being agile in the whole situation.
You're not limited, like you say, you're not limited to leasing a giant restaurant space, going through all the permitting and approval process and what have you. There are other alternatives now. The one that jumps to my mind that I don't think you mentioned was ghost kitchens, commissary kitchens, the like are really growing, particularly I know in the bigger cities. Los Angeles has its share, New York has plenty, and et cetera. But where you can lease a small kitchen space that's pre-health department approved, has everything that you need ready to go. You just throw your specific equipment you need into it and you start cooking and start marketing your business. And then you start with to-go and delivery service exclusively. As a means, though, what most people are using it as is as the means to test the concept, to test the market, to try out a new idea. And it's incredibly cheap compared to opening a restaurant. The barriers to entry are lower than they've ever been.
Hey, we have a question from our audience. Guilherme asks, do you have any tips for restaurants that are also struggling during COVID?
Well, that's such a broad question. It depends on why they're struggling during COVID, really. But I would have to route back to kind of what I was saying before. Are you really focusing on the quality of experience you're providing through alternative modes of service that aren't sitting in your dine-in restaurant? And there's, like you said, there's lots of room for creativity in that realm, and for optimizing the customer's experience through delivery, takeout, cook-at-home meals, all these other options for how you serve your customers. So I think maximizing that opportunity is probably the most important factor for survival in this time for restaurants. And being careful not to sacrifice on quality of your product, because it's part of that's just to do with, like I was saying, the to-go and delivery, the difficulties involved in maintaining the quality of your offering. But it's really easy to slip when things get stressful and times get lean and tough. And it's really the time you need to focus the most and make sure that from the customer's perspective, there's no drop in the quality of their experience.
Yeah, really good points. And I think too, from a business owner's point of view, the hardest time to be creative is when you're under stress, right? When it's like the business is dropping, you don't have the sales, all of that. And I would say during this time, it's also really important for restaurant owners to be connected to other restaurant owners who are being creative and getting things going, to get that support going, and the creative problem solving. And I know that in preparing for this podcast, I did so much research about, these alternative models, and it's amazing what restaurant owners have done, to find creative ways to serve customers right along with, in alignment with everything that you're saying, not to forget those vital points. We have one more question and then our time is up.
Wow.
Are you thinking about expanding business to other cities anytime soon?
We don't have any new cities beyond the Los Angeles region on our radar at the moment. We do have 2 new stores opening in different parts of, of Los Angeles later 2021. But as far as going outside of that general vicinity, no, we don't have any immediate plans on that. But I wouldn't rule it out in the coming couple of years. Particularly other cities in our general Southwest region of the country. We know that there's plenty of places that we would love to be in and that we think we do really well. It's just a matter of us being ready and the timing being right.
Right. So strategically, from a business point of view, you kind of get momentum if you're expanding within a certain geographical location, in terms of building community and recognition and all of that. So to decide to go to another city is, there's opportunity there, and there's also a lot of cost involved with, getting a business up and running in a totally different location. But I think what's great in your situation is you have so much expertise from the different locations that you've worked in, so that it's almost kind of the franchising type of mentality where you have your operations and systems, and how to create the experience that Backyard Bowls delivers, no matter if it's in LA or Santa Barbara or somewhere else. So that'll be exciting. We'll stay tuned to see what comes up with that. We have reached the end of our time, but tell us, I know that our audience would like to, connect with you, keep up with what you're doing, and also get the experience of Backyard Bowls. So how would you recommend they best connect with you and experience Backyard Bowls?
Well, as far as experiencing Backyard Bowls, it's pretty easy. You can visit any of our existing locations, find us on the web, backyardbowls.com. I know the show notes will have all of the various contact informations. And as for me, you can find me on LinkedIn, might be your best bet. If you had a specific question, I'm happy to help via email as well, dan@backyardbowls.com. I'm a bit of a social media monk, so I don't have the Instagram and Twitter to share with everyone personally, but that's probably best, but feel free to reach out.
Yeah, great. And if you're not in the California, Santa Barbara, LA area, check them out on their Backyard Bowls is active on social media. So be sure you check out their website and their social media. You can see what they have going. It's really inspiring. Dan, thank you so much for being with us. You've really shared so much information that can inspire aspiring restaurant and food service business owners. And I really look forward to hearing some stories from our audience about what cool things you start up. So do, connect back with us and let us know about that. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, everybody. Help us build our community, because we are stronger and more innovative together as entrepreneurs. And until next week, everybody, keep on bringing your great ideas to life and seek out your community that helps you do that. The Scheinfeld Center is here for you in that way. Thanks again, Dan, and thank you, everybody. Have a great week.
Thank you.